This is a short story of early Sarasota and Manatee County about a jokester that served delicious oysters. It is meant to be a prelude to another topic, the Sarasota Bay Oysters. Now you see them, now you don't. Waddy A. Bacon, a pensioned Confederate veteran and family, originally from Mississippi, homesteaded a parcel about 1879 on Little Sarasota Bay just below South Creek in Laurel. Waddy and Hattie Bacon and their 6 children lived in a frame house and 2 houses with roof and sides of palmetto thatch. Homes at that time were often named, and this one was known as the Old Hen. The children, the ones I have record of, included son Edmund P. and daughters Mary, Hattie, Edith, and Mrs. Jasper B. Harris. Bacon farmed, but was also known as the Oysterman. He would experiment with different ways of keeping and serving oysters. Waddy Bacon's son, Edmund Bacon, was a part of the Sarasota Vigilantes and was present for both murders committed by that group. In Edge of Wilderness by Janet Snyder Matthews, he was described as the youngest of the men. His hair is cut short, convict style, and that, combined with high cheekbones and large mouth, gives him rather the hardest appearance of any man in the party. In the killing of Charles Abbey on December 27, 1884, Edmund's boat with a green cabin was seen at the scene of the crime. A blood trail led to the water where Edmund's barefoot prints were identified, and his boat was seen heading out to the Gulf, pulling a smaller boat. The thought was that he dumped Abbey's body miles out into the Gulf. He was found not guilty in this killing. In the earlier ambush and killing of Harrison T. Riley on June 30, 1884, which happened at the current intersection of Proctor Road and Sawyer Road near the farm of Dr. Andrews, Bacon was found guilty and sentenced to hang, along with Dr. Andrews and Alfred Bidwell. The 3 appealed their sentence to the Florida Supreme Court to no avail. After waiting in a jail cell at Pine Level for a year, Ed Bacon and Dr. Andrews grabbed shotguns and escaped. It was rumored Dr. Andrews went to California, where his son joined him years later. There was no knowledge of where Edmund Bacon went to. Sarasota Bay Oysters were the largest and best tasting in the area. Ads for Sarasota oysters were in the Tampa papers and beyond. Even when the supply of oysters were drained due to overharvesting by locals and Tampa companies, the ads about Sarasota oysters didn't mean they were from Sarasota Bay, but that they were large and tasty. After the Scott colony arrived in Sarasota and the FMIC, Florida Mortgage and Investment Company, had extended the wharf, Waddy saw an opportunity in the new village. The Story of Sarasota by Carl Grismer states, Bacon was one of the village's quaintest characters. A thin, scrawny old fellow, he built a 3-room oyster house about halfway out on the wharf. There he lived with his family and served oysters, either raw or cooked, to the public. With each order of oysters, he donated a big glass of corn beer, a potent beverage guaranteed to give any drinker a desired dizzy in record time. Manatee County was a dry county, which meant alcohol could not be sold in the county. Those that did sell alcohol illegally and the establishments they did it from were called blind tigers. You could, however, have alcohol in your home if it wasn't excessive. The actual enforcement of the law was up to the county marshal, who was located at the river or Manatee River towns. Bacon's oyster experience in Laurel served him well in the village of Sarasota. He was a hit not only in town, but accolades came from the Manatee River Journal in Bradenton. Captain W.A. Bacon of Sarasota has the most complete oyster house in the state. When you visit Sarasota, don't fail to give the captain a call. We spent a few hours with our old friend Major Bacon and were nicely entertained by him, but the Major's faculty for dispensing genuine Southern hospitality is too well known to be mentioned here. A trip to Sarasota without calling on the Major would be incomplete. Captain Bacon of Sarasota has splendid oysters. During the 1891 Florida Exposition, Bacon brought samples of his spiced and pickled oysters to exhibit, which have quite a reputation for the excellency of their quality with those who have tried them. Waddy Bacon's son-in-law, Jasper Harris, also ran an oyster restaurant in Bradentown. He said he had a supplier of the famous Sarasota Bay Oysters. Could it be his father-in-law? Jasper also showed his offerings of oysters at the State Exposition. J.B. Harris used Bacon's old homestead as his family's summer retreat. Old Waddy was a prankster, and he definitely had some fun in early Sarasota. The story of Sarasota reported 2 such pranks in its text. J. Hamilton Gillespie had one of the first artesian wells in Manatee County drilled at the hub of 5 Points. Although tasting slightly of sulfur, he was so proud of it he had the state chemist analyze the contents, who pronounced it very healthy. Gillespie had a pipe run under the ground from the 5 Points well to a fountain at the intersection of Palm and Main. From there he had the water pumped up to the 3rd floor of the DeSoto to provide water for the hotel. While the artesian well was being drilled, Sarasota got a real thrill. Spectators noticed bright, shiny particles of metal in the borings. The report that gold had been found spread to all parts of the community, and within a few hours several hundred persons gathered at 5 Points. They crowded and pushed to pick up shiny pieces, but their hopes were shattered. It was soon learned that a practical joker had played a trick on them. W.A. Old Man Bacon had filed some brass at Jack Tatum's blacksmith shop and had scattered the filings around the well. The second prank probably happened in Waddy's oyster shack, just about 50 yards from the Florida Mortgage and Investment Company store, which was also used at J. Hamilton Gillespie's warehouse. The village pranksters usually enlisted Bacon's help when they wanted to have a little fun. One day they learned that Gillespie had just received a new shipment of good Kentucky rye. They called upon Bacon to devise a way by which they could get some of the precious liquor. He scratched his head, thought a while, and then reached in his pocket, drew out his knife, and pricked his arm twice. When blood covered his arm, he hollered as though in fearful pain, hollered so loud that Gillespie, 100 yards away, heard him and came running. When he approached, Bacon moaned, "Gosh, Mr. Gillespie, a big rattler got me. Oh, that pizen's going all through me. I'm a goner sure." Gillespie responded as Bacon had expected. "You need some whiskey. Quick, I'll get it for you." He ran into the warehouse and came out with a bottle of Old Crow. Bacon took a big swig and then slumped down. His companions took the bottle and behind Gillespie's back passed it around. In a few minutes the bottle was emptied. Gillespie soon learned he had been fooled, but just to show he wasn't offended, he brought out another bottle. Then everyone was happy. Waddy Bacon was a prankster, but he had his serious side. Yellow fever was especially bad in Manatee County in the late 1880s. It hit Palmetto hard, and there were cases along the Manatee River. All areas of Manatee County were quarantined. Pliny Reasoner, founder of the Reasoner Brothers Nursery, who had been out of the country when yellow fever hit Florida, had to sneak back into the country, then sneak back to Florida, just to die of yellow fever soon after he returned. Dr. Robert Wallace, who had come with the Scott colony and built a house on Lower Main Street, was responsible for keeping yellow fever out of Sarasota. He had one scare, but it turned out to be dengue fever. Dr. Wallace also helped out where he could throughout Manatee County. Bacon was charged by the County Board of Health to be the inspector for the village of Sarasota. The Manatee River Journal of September 13, 1888 printed, "The report of W.A. Bacon, inspector at Sarasota, was read and approved. On motion, it was ordered that there being no further necessity for continuing the quarantine at Sarasota, the same is being hereby discontinued and W.A. Bacon relieved, and that the thanks of this board are tendered to Captain Bacon for the very efficient manner in which he discharged the duties of his office as inspector." Even after the threat was gone, Waddy was part of the County Board of Health Committee, and in 1893 and 1894 was appointed the local sanitary inspector by the Manatee County Board of Commissioners. He was to inspect the village premises one day each week for $2 a day. Manatee County at this time had its Republicans and Socialists, but was primarily dominated by Southern Democrats. Bacon didn't run for office, but he showed his support by cooking up a great chowder for the Democratic Party picnic in Sarasota and serving as election manager, clerk, or inspector for several of the elections. Odd jobs. Sarasota was a small village, and sometimes in order to survive, you would have to pick up odd jobs. The Manatee County Board of Commissioners hired Waddy to put lumber on road in January of 1893 and paid him $5.93. They also paid him $51.60 to supply 153 barrels of shells for road work. Bacon owned a sloop, which he used to harvest oysters and deliver the cargo. In August of 1894, the newspaper reported, "During the rough weather last week, Mr. Bacon's sloop of Sarasota, in charge of Captain Fletcher, was caught in the breakers outside the pass and capsized. Her cabin smashed and the 2 men on board had a narrow escape, being rescued by a schooner that came to their relief." Waddy and Hattie loved their daughters and would visit their married daughter in Bradentown, Mrs. Jasper B. Harris, often. The Manatee River Journal reported in July of 1893 a family bet between Waddy and 2 of his daughters. These are certainly times of unusual activity in Sarasota. Everyone knows Captain Bacon's 2 daughters, Mrs. Flint and Miss Hattie Bacon. The captain, doubting their walking ability, offered them $5 to walk from Sarasota to Bradentown. Early Monday morning, they started on their trip and arrived at Mr. J.B. Harris's residence before 10 a.m. The difficulty of this undertaking at this time of year was considerable, and the money was certainly well earned. Edith Bacon enrolled in the county high school in Bradentown in March of 1894. The Manatee County School Board had decided that they could only afford to have a single high school in the county, grades 8 through 12. Their decision to make it available in Bradentown was because it was a county seat, and that between Bradentown, Palmetto, and Manatee, they had the largest potential student population. Unfortunately for everyone else in the county, any students attending the high school would have to find boarding. To be closer to his daughter and son-in-law in Bradentown and get more customers, Bacon, in August of 1894, decided to build an oyster house in Palmetto, connecting it to the old upper wharf, and it was reported that building of the oyster house was underway by November. It was probably good that he decided to move his business, because a little over 6 months later, strong winds blew down the house of W.A. Bacon and part of the wharf of the Florida Mortgage and Investment Company into Sarasota Bay. His daughter, Mrs. Flint, whose house was connected to the oyster house, was saved by Captain F.M. Grantham and crew from falling into the bay. Not happy being connected to the old Palmetto wharf, Waddy moved his four-room oyster house to the new Palmetto Wharf, floating it over on lighters in August of 1897. Everything was good for the Bacon family, and within the next year, three of his daughters got married. Mary married J.C. Harris, Hattie married Ed Robinson, and Edith married Thomas A. Howes. Mary also recorded a final homestead proof notice in June. Waddy was going to give up living on the water. He bought a lot and was planning to build a home in the Patton tract in front of Mr. Hodler's place when on July 1st of 1900 he had a stroke, which at that time was known as stricken with paralysis. He died on July 13th and was buried in the Fogartyville Cemetery. Mrs. Hattie Bacon moved to Plant City, where she was collecting a Confederacy Army widow's pension. In May of 1911, while visiting her son-in-law, James C. Harris, near Manatee, she died very suddenly. She was also buried in the Fogartyville Cemetery. The obituary read as follows: Mrs. Bacon was born in Mississippi 72 years ago, but had been a resident of Manatee County for over 30 years. She was the mother of 8 children and is survived by 4 daughters. The deceased had been a consistent member of the Methodist Church for 40 years. Thank you for attending Waddy Bacon, the Oysterman.